There are moments in life that feel ordinary until suddenly they don't. This is one of those moments. You watch as you pause here, yes, you. Not casually, not randomly, but intentionally. Because something inside you told you not to scroll past. Something deeper than logic, stronger than distraction, quieter than fear, but louder than everything else pulling at your attention right now. And that's where it begins. Because what if the very reason you stopped here was the moment everything started shifting? He reveals this truth with authority. You were not meant to find this message. You were meant to be interrupted by it. Think about it. How many times have you replayed that moment in your mind? That decision, that mistake, that one thing you wish you could go back and undo. You've tried to move on, tried to bury it, tried to convince yourself that it's in the past. But somehow it never fully left you, did it? It lingers. In quiet nights. In random thoughts. In the subtle feeling that things could have been different if only that one moment had gone another way. And here is where the voice of Archangel Michael rises, not softly, but with clarity that cuts through confusion. What if I told you that moment is no longer fixed in time? You feel that, don't you? Because something about this message feels different. It doesn't feel like motivation. It doesn't feel like coincidence. It feels targeted. Like it's speaking directly into a place in your life that no one else sees. That's because heaven does. And heaven has intervened. Right now. Yes, right now. Something has shifted in the unseen realm. A divine interruption has been released into your timeline. Not tomorrow. Not someday. But now. And it's not here to comfort you. It's here to wake you. Because the version of your life you've been living may not be the final version anymore. He walks beside you in this moment, not as a distant observer, but as a protector revealing what's been hidden, the timeline you've been stuck in, the one shaped by regret, delay, missed opportunities. The timeline has been challenged, revisited. You're in. But here's the part that will shake you. This moment only exists while you are present with it. That pull you feel to scroll away. That sudden urge to check something else. That whisper telling you this is just another video that is not random. That is resistance. Because the moment you disengage, the interruption weakens. The awareness fades. And the old pattern, the old timeline, begins to reassert itself. He warns you now, not to scare you, but to sharpen you. You are standing at a crossroads that most people don't even realize exists. One path leads back into repetition. Same struggles, same weight, same silent questions. The other path leads into something rewritten, something restored, something that no longer holds your past against you. And the only difference between those two paths is whether you stay present in this moment. Let that settle. Because this is not about fear. This is about focus. This is about recognizing that sometimes the biggest shifts in life don't come with loud announcements. They come disguised as quiet interruptions, moments that seem small on the outside, but carry the weight of destiny on the inside. He speaks again. Steady and unshaken, you asked for a sign. You asked for a second chance. You asked for something to change. And now that it's here, will you recognize it? That question lingers in the air now. Not for everyone. For you. Because something has already begun. Something you cannot fully see yet, but you can feel it. A shift. A stirring. A subtle but undeniable sense that this moment matters more than it should. And that's because it does. Stay here. Stay aware. Because what comes next will reveal why this interruption had to happen now, and what is already being rewritten because of it. Type "I am ready for the shift" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing Code 2020 is now activated. There are things in your life you have accepted as permanent not because you wanted to, but because time convinced you there was no going back. He sees it clearly the moment you stopped asking, stopped hoping, stopped believing that anything connected to that past mistake could ever change. You told yourself, it is what it is. You convinced yourself that life had already moved forward, even if something inside you never fully did. But what if time didn't move the way you thought it did? What if that moment you buried, that decision you regret, that path you wish you never took was never locked in place the way you believed? He speaks now with a voice that carries both authority and restoration, a voice that does not echo through time but stands outside of it. There are moments when heaven does not follow your timeline. Heaven interrupts it. And this is one of those moments. Because while you have been living forward, heaven has been moving backward. Not to expose you, not to shame you, but to reach into a moment you thought was sealed and touch it again. You feel the tension rising inside you now, because something about this truth unsettles what you thought was certain. You were taught that the past is fixed, that consequences must be carried, that mistakes define the path ahead. And for so long, you've lived as if that is the final law. But heaven does not operate by limitation. Heaven operates by authority. And when God decides to revisit something, it is not to remind you of what you did wrong. It is to reclaim what was taken from you in that moment. He reveals it like this: there was more attached to that mistake than you realized. It wasn't just a decision. It wasn't just an event. It was a turning point where something was lost. Peace, opportunity, confidence, direction, maybe even a sense of identity. And ever since that moment, you have been walking forward but carrying the weight of something that belonged to the past. That is why it has followed you. That is why certain patterns repeated. That is why some doors never fully opened the way they should have. Because part of your timeline was never healed. But tonight, something extraordinary is happening. He shows it as a shift in the unseen, like a clock that suddenly pauses, hesitates, and then begins to move differently. Not forward, not backward, but in alignment with divine intention. And in that shift, the moment you thought was final is being revisited. Not by you, by heaven. This is where most people miss it, because they assume change only happens in the present. They assume healing only moves forward. But what is happening now is deeper than that. It is not just your future being prepared, it is your past being corrected. And you were not meant to understand this with logic alone. You were meant to feel it, because something inside you is reacting right now. A memory, a name, a situation. Something is coming back into your awareness, not randomly but precisely. That is not your mind wandering. That is the rewind beginning. He speaks again, steady and unwavering. You thought you missed your chance. But your chance was never removed, it was delayed until you were ready to receive it differently. Let that settle into you. Because this is not about undoing everything. This is about redeeming what mattered. Heaven is not erasing your story. Heaven is stepping into a moment of your story and changing its outcome. And when that outcome changes, everything connected to it begins to shift. That is why this moment matters so much. Because if you understand what is happening, you won't treat it casually. You won't dismiss it. You won't scroll past it as just another message. You will recognize that something sacred is taking place, something that most people never become aware of. A divine correction, a spiritual recalibration, a moment where what once worked against you is now being repositioned to work for you. But there is a condition. You must stay aligned with this awareness, because the rewind is not forced, it is received. If you disconnect, if you doubt, if you fall back into the old narrative that says nothing can change, then the old timeline regains its strength. Not because heaven failed, but because alignment was broken. This is why your attention matters right now. This is why your focus matters right now. Because you are not just hearing a message, you are standing inside a moment where your timeline is being adjusted. And what comes next will reveal how that written moment begins to affect everything that follows. Stay present. Because the pen has not just been lifted over your past, it is about to begin writing something new. Type "I receive my right" in the comments. Blessing code 3030 is now activated. There is a moment, rare, sacred, almost impossible to describe, when the authority of heaven does not just observe your life, it intervenes and begins to rewrite it. This is that moment. He stands now, not distant, not symbolic, but present in the spirit, holding something that changes everything you thought was permanent. Not a scale to judge you, not a record to condemn you, but a pen. And that pen is not idle. It is moving. You feel the weight of that truth, because deep inside you have lived as if your story was already written, as if the chapters behind you defined the chapters ahead, as if the mistakes you made became permanent ink, unchangeable, undeniable, irreversible. But what if the ink was never final? What if what you thought was written in permanence was only written in permission? He speaks now with a voice that carries both power and precision. Where you saw an ending, I saw an unfinished sentence. That changes everything. Because the mistake you made years ago, the one that still echoes in your thoughts, the one that shaped decisions, relationships, and even how you see yourself, that moment was never meant to define you. It was never meant to lock you into a life of repayment, struggle, or limitation. But you've lived like it did. You adjusted your expectations. You lowered your vision. You accepted less than what was originally assigned to you, not because it was taken, but because you believed you disqualified yourself from receiving it. And now, heaven is correcting that belief. Because what is happening in this moment is not symbolic, it is transactional. There is a rewriting taking place. He reveals it like a ledger being opened, a record that has been sitting in the unseen, carrying the weight of what you thought you owed. Every regret, every missed opportunity, every consequence that followed your decision, it all formed a kind of spiritual debt in your mind. Not because God placed it there, but because you did. You carried it. You accounted for it. You believed it had to be repaid through struggle, through delay, through proving yourself over time. But now, the pen moves. And with it, something shifts that you were never taught to expect. The debt is not being collected. It is being rewritten. Not erased in denial, but transformed in authority. He writes where there was once lack, and the word changes to abundance. He writes where there was once delay, and the meaning shifts to divine timing. He writes where there was once loss, and suddenly it becomes preparation. This is not imagination. This is restoration in motion. And the reason it feels so intense right now is because part of you is still holding on to the old version of the story. The version where you had to pay for what happened. The version where things could never fully turn around. The version where that mistake quietly followed you into every new season. But that version is losing authority. Because the moment the pen moves, the narrative changes. And when the narrative changes, the outcome must follow. He leans closer in the spirit, not to overwhelm you, but to make this clear: you are not being judged for that moment anymore. You are being repositioned because of it. Let that truth settle deeply, because it means everything you thought disqualified you is now being used to qualify you for something greater. The pain you carried becomes perspective. The loss you endured becomes leverage. The mistake you regret becomes the very point where grace enters your story in a way it never has before. And now, something even more specific is happening. Your writing is not abstract. It is active. Here is something being prepared for you in the natural that reflects what is being rewritten in the spiritual. A message, a notification, a contact, an opportunity, something that will seem small on the surface, but will carry confirmation that this shift is real. That is why the timing matters so much. Because what is written in the Spirit is about to echo in your reality. But you must remain aligned. You must not return to the old language of "it's too late" or "that ship has sailed" or "I missed my chance." Because those words belong to a version of your story that is no longer being written. The pen has moved past that line. And if you try to go back and read from the old script, you will miss what is being written now. He speaks one more time, firm and unshaken. Stay with me in this moment, because what I am writing will not make sense to your past, but it will define your future. This is where faith becomes alignment. Not blind belief, but conscious agreement with what is being rewritten. You are not who you were in that moment. You are who heaven says you are now. And right now, your story is being rewritten not into survival, but into abundance. Stay ready, because what comes next will not just confirm this shift, it will activate it in a way you cannot ignore. Type "My story is being rewritten" in the comments. Lesson code 4545 is now activated. As this truth settles into your spirit, understand this: every word you are receiving is not just for you. It is meant to reach others who are still trapped in the old version of their story. When you sow into this message through Super Thanks or the PayPal link in the description, you are placing oil into a lamp that brings light to someone else standing in darkness. The Lord says, "Give, and it shall be given unto you," not as a suggestion, but as a living promise being activated through your obedience right now. If you feel this stirring in your heart, this is your moment to respond, not out of obligation, but out of alignment with what God is doing through you. Your seed becomes a voice. Your generosity becomes a breakthrough for someone who has been waiting for this exact message. Do not hesitate. Do not delay, because what you release in faith returns multiplied in ways you cannot yet see. Step into this act now, and let your giving become part of the miracle God is unfolding through this mission. Here is something you have been carrying for far longer than you realize. Not in your hands, not where others could see it, but deep within you, in your thoughts, in your reactions, in the quiet moments when no one else is around. A weight that does not always announce itself loudly, yet it shapes how you move, how you decide, how you believe. He sees it clearly now, even if you have learned to ignore it. Because this weight did not begin today. It began in that moment you have tried to move past, tried to outgrow, tried to silence with time. But instead of disappearing, it settled. It became part of your internal world, quietly influencing how you see yourself and what you think you deserve. You may not call it guilt. You may not even think about it consciously. But it shows up in subtle ways. It shows up when you hesitate before stepping into something new. It shows up when you question whether good things will last. It shows up when you feel like you have to work harder than everyone else just to make up for something you can't even fully explain anymore. That is the weight. And what makes it so powerful is that it has been normalized. You have lived with it for so long that it started to feel like part of who you are, instead of something you were never meant to carry. He speaks now with clarity that cuts through every layer of confusion. That weight was never assigned to you. You picked it up in a moment when you thought you had to. Let that truth sink in. Because in that past moment, the mistake, the decision, the turning point, you didn't just experience consequences. You made an internal agreement, unspoken belief that said, because this happened, I must carry this. And from that agreement, the weight formed. It attached itself to your identity. It whispered that you had to be careful now. It told you that certain doors might not be for you anymore. It convinced you that you had to earn back something that was never actually taken from you. And without realizing it, you adjusted your life around it. But here is what changes everything. The agreement is being broken. Right now. Not slowly. Not eventually. But in this very moment, as awareness rises, the weight is being exposed for what it truly is. Not a punishment. Not a requirement. But a burden that was never meant to follow you beyond that moment. He reveals it like chains that were never locked, yet you believed they were. You adapted your steps to their presence. You limited your reach because of their weight. You learned to function within boundaries that were never truly real. And now, as the rewriting has begun, that weight cannot remain. Because you cannot step into abundance while still carrying a mindset of repayment. You cannot receive what is being released to you while still believing you owe something for what has already been addressed. That is why this part matters so deeply. Because before the new can fully manifest, the old must be released. Not just externally, internally. He moves closer in the spirit, not to overwhelm you, but to make this undeniable. You have carried this long enough. What you thought was your responsibility was never your burden to keep. There is a shift happening inside you now. You can feel it. A resistance at first, because part of you has grown familiar with this weight. Part of you has built your identity around overcoming it, managing it, surviving with it. But another part of you, the part that recognizes truth, is beginning to loosen its grip. And that is where freedom begins. Because once you see the weight clearly, you can no longer justify carrying it. Once you understand that it was never assigned to your future, you can no longer tie it to your identity. And once you accept that it has already been addressed in the rewriting, you can finally release it without fear. This is not about pretending the past didn't happen. This is about recognizing that what happened does not have the authority to define what happens next. The weight loses power the moment you stop agreeing with it. And that moment is now. He speaks again, steady and unshaken. Lay it down. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Now. Because what is coming cannot align with what you are holding on to. That is the urgency. Because something is already moving toward you. Something that reflects the new version of your story. But if you hold on to the old weight, you will misinterpret what arrives. You will question it. You will doubt it. You may even reject it, not because it isn't real, but because it does not match the version of yourself you have been operating from. And that cannot happen. Not now. Not when the shift is this close. So feel it one last time. Recognize it. Acknowledge it. And then release it. Because what you have been carrying has already been lifted in the spirit. Now it is your turn to let it go in the natural. Type I release the weight in the comments. Blessing code 5656 is now activated. There are moments when change feels gradual, when progress comes step by step, layer by layer, slowly unfolding over time. But then there are moments like this, moments where something shifts all at once, not because of effort, not because of time, but because of divine authority stepping in and declaring that enough is enough. This is not a slow process. This is a transaction. He reveals it now with precision, like a transfer taking place in a realm you cannot see, yet one that is already affecting everything connected to your life. Because what is happening tonight is not symbolic, it is not emotional, it is not just a feeling rising within you. It is an exchange. Something is being taken off of you, and something is being placed into your life. At the same time, you feel it, even if you cannot fully explain it. A sense that something is lifting, something is shifting, something is rearranging itself in ways that do not follow the normal patterns you are used to. That is because this moment does not belong to the natural order. It belongs to divine intervention. He speaks now with clarity that carries weight. What you thought you owed is being removed. What you never expected to receive is being released. That is the transaction. Because for so long, you have lived as if life operates on a system of repayment. You believed that what happened in your past created a balance that had to be corrected over time. That you had to go through struggle, delay, limitation, as a form of balancing what once went wrong. But heaven does not operate on your system of repayment. Heaven operates on redemption. And redemption does not collect, it restores. So what is happening now is not you earning something. It is you receiving something that has already been authorized. He shows it like a scale being completely reset. On one side, everything you carried, regret, missed opportunities, internal agreements, limitations. On the other side, what was always meant for you, peace, provision, open doors, alignment, abundance. And instead of balancing the scale, he removes the weight entirely. That is what makes this moment so powerful. Because the system you thought governed your life is no longer in control. The transaction has already been initiated. But here is where your awareness becomes critical. Because when something is taken off of you, your first instinct is often to look for it, to check if it is really gone, to question whether it could return, to wonder if you truly deserve what is now being placed in front of you. That hesitation, that questioning is the only thing that can delay what is already happening. He speaks again, firm and unwavering. Do not reach back for what I have removed. Do not question what I have released. Because the moment you begin to doubt, you step out of alignment with the transaction. Not because it stops, but because you stop receiving it. This is why your focus matters so much right now. Because something is already moving toward you in the natural. Something that reflects this exchange. It may come as a message, a notification, a sudden opportunity, a conversation that opens a door you thought was closed. And when it arrives, it will not look like compensation for the past. It will look like something new, something unexpected, something that does not match the narrative you have been living under. And that is where many people miss it, because they are waiting for life to make sense based on what they have been through. But this moment is not about making sense. It is about shifting direction. He reveals it clearly. What is coming will not match what you expected because it was not designed by your past. Let that settle into you. Because it means you cannot measure what is arriving by what has happened before. You cannot filter it through the lens of your previous experiences. You must receive it as it is. New. Unattached to the old narrative. Free from the weight that once defined how you responded to opportunity. This is the moment where everything changes. Not gradually, not eventually, but now. The transaction has already been set in motion. The only question is whether you will remain aligned long enough to see it fully manifest. Because if you return to old thinking, old patterns, old assumptions, you will misinterpret what is unfolding. You will hesitate where you should move. You will question where you should receive. You will delay what is meant to accelerate. And that cannot happen. Not now. not when everything is already shifting in your favor. He steps forward in the spirit one final time, making this undeniable. You are not waiting for change. You are standing inside of it. That is the truth of this moment. The transaction is not coming. It is happening. And what comes next will confirm it in a way you cannot ignore. Stay ready. Stay aligned. Because what is being released tonight will not resemble anything you have experienced before. Type "I receive the exchange" in the comments. Blessing code 6767 is now activated. There is a reason this moment feels intense. There is a reason your attention feels pulled in different directions. There is a reason something inside you is trying to fully receive this while something else is quietly urging you to move on, to scroll, to disconnect, to treat this like nothing more than another passing message. That tension you feel right now is not random. It is resistance. He reveals it clearly, not to create fear, but to sharpen your awareness. Whenever a shift like this begins, whenever something is being rewritten, restored, or released, there is always an opposing force that tries to pull you back into what was. Not because it has power over you, but because it relies on your agreement to continue. You see, the old timeline you have been living in, the one shaped by that past mistake, by delay, by internal weight, by limitation, it does not disappear automatically. It weakens. It loses authority. But it waits for one thing: your attention. Because attention is agreement, and agreement is what sustains it. He speaks now with precision. The old timeline cannot hold you unless you hold on to it. Let that truth settle deeply, because it means the greatest threat to this moment is not external. It is not something happening around you. It is something subtle, internal, almost unnoticeable if you are not aware. It is the pull to return to what feels familiar. The thought that says nothing really changes. The instinct to dismiss what you are hearing. The urge to disconnect before the message fully settles. That is how the old timeline reasserts itself. Not through force, through distraction. You have experienced this before, even if you didn't recognize it at the time. Moments where you felt close to clarity, close to change, close to something new, and then suddenly, something shifted. Your focus broke. Your belief weakened. You returned to old patterns without even realizing when it happened. That was not coincidence. That was interruption. But not the divine kind. The kind that pulls you away from what is being revealed and places you back into what you have already outgrown. And now, it is happening again. But this time, you are aware of it. This time, you can see it. This time, you have the opportunity to choose differently. He steps forward in the spirit, his presence steady and unshaken. Do not confuse familiarity with truth. What feels normal is not always what is right for you anymore. That is the key. Because the old timeline feels familiar. It feels predictable. It aligns with what you have experienced, what you have expected, what you have learned to accept. But familiarity is not alignment. And right now, you are being pulled into something that does not feel familiar. Something that challenges what you thought was fixed. Something that requires you to stay present, to stay focused, to stay connected even when part of you wants to drift away. That is the test of this moment. Not whether the shift is real, but whether you will remain aligned with it long enough to see it fully unfold. Because the enemy's strategy is not to stop what is happening. It is to interrupt your connection to it. To make you question. To make you disengage. To make you return to the version of yourself that expects less, that settles for less, that believes the old story more than the new one being written. And it does this in ways that feel ordinary. A sudden distraction, a thought that pulled you away, a feeling that this is too much or not real, a quiet voice that says, "You've heard things like this before." But this moment is not like before, because this time you are not just hearing something, you are standing inside of something, a shift that is already in motion, a rewrite that is already taking place, a transaction that has already begun, and the only way to miss it is to disconnect from it. He makes this clear now, with authority that leaves no room for confusion. Stay here. Stay aware. Stay aligned. Because what is unfolding cannot fully manifest if you step back into what you have already been released from. This is where your power lies. Not in forcing anything, not in trying to make something happen, but in staying present with what is already happening. Because presence breaks the hold of distraction. Presence strengthens alignment. Presence keeps you connected to the shift long enough for it to take form in your reality. And this is why the warning matters. Not to create fear, but to create focus. Because the old timeline is not stronger than you. It is only sustained by what you give your attention to. And right now, your attention is being redirected towards something new, towards something written, towards something that does not match what you have been through but aligns with what you are being brought into. So do not disengage. Do not dismiss. Do not step away. Because what comes next is where the shift begins to show itself in ways you cannot ignore. Type "I stay aligned" in the comments. Blessing code 7878 is now activated. Here is something coming. Not in a distant, abstract way. Not someday, not eventually, not in a way you have to guess or interpret endlessly. It is coming in a form you recognize. A message. A notification. A moment that will seem ordinary on the surface, yet carry a weight that will feel anything but ordinary when it reaches you. And the reason it will stand out is because your spirit will recognize it before your mind fully understands it. He reveals this now with clarity that removes all doubt. What is approaching you is not coincidence. It is not luck. It is not something that just happened. It is connected to everything that hath been unfolding in this moment. It is a direct reflection of the shift that has already begun in the unseen. You have experienced random notifications before. Messages that arrive at just the right time. Calls that changed direction. Opportunities that appeared when you least expected them. But this is different. Because this time you are being prepared for it. That is what makes this moment so critical. Because when something arrives unexpectedly, most people react based on their past. They hesitate. They question. They overanalyze. They filter the moment through old experiences, old disappointments, old beliefs about what is possible. And in doing so they miss what was actually meant for them. But this time, you will not miss it. Because you are being aligned before it arrives. He speaks now with steady authority. What is coming will look small to others, but it will carry confirmation for you. Let that settle into your awareness. Because the notification, the message, the opportunity, it may not appear overwhelming. It may not come with loud announcements or dramatic changes at first. In fact, it may look almost too simple, too easy, too unexpected to be significant. But that is exactly how divine movement often enters your life. Quietly, precisely, without needing to prove itself. And when it arrives, something inside you will respond instantly. Not emotionally, not impulsively, but with a deep sense of recognition. A knowing that does not require explanation. A clarity that bypasses doubt. That is the confirmation. But here is what you must understand. The notification itself is not the full shift. It is the doorway. It is the moment where what hath been rewritten begins to intersect with your reality, and your response to it determines what happens next. He reveals it like a key being placed into your hand. The key does not force the door open. It does not push you forward. It simply gives you access. And access requires action. This is where many people hesitate, because when something new appears, especially after a long season of delay or struggle, the instinct is to protect yourself, to question whether it is real, to wonder if it will last, to look for signs that it might lead to disappointment again. That hesitation is the echo of the old timeline, the version of you that learned to expect less, the version of you that adapted to limitation, the version of you that believed opportunities came with conditions, with risks, with reasons to hold back. But that version is not aligned with what is happening now. He makes this clear. Do not respond to what is coming with the mindset of who you used to be. Respond as the person you are becoming. That is the shift. Because the notification is not just about what is arriving. It is about who you are when it arrives. Are you still carrying the old weight? Are you still expecting delay? Are you still questioning whether good things are meant for you? Or have you fully stepped into the awareness that something has already changed? Because your response will reveal your alignment, and alignment determines activation. You will feel the moment when it happens. It may come quickly. It may come in a way that interrupts your routine. It may arrive when you are not actively looking for it. But when it does, there will be no confusion in your spirit. Only a choice. To step forward, or to hesitate. He steps closer in the spirit, his voice unwavering. This is the moment where the unseen becomes seen. Do not treat it casually, because what is coming is not just a sign. It is a bridge between the version of your life that was and the version that is now unfolding. And once you step onto it, there is no returning to what you were before. This is why you had to hear this first. This is why you had to become aware before it arrives. So that when the moment comes, you do not second guess it. You recognize it. You receive it. You move with it. And you allow it to take you into what has already been prepared. Stay ready, because the notification is closer than you think. And when it arrives, it will confirm everything. Type "I am ready" to receive in the comments. Blessing code 8989 is now activated. There is a difference between something happening around you and something happening through you. Right now, the shift is not just external. It is not just something unfolding in the unseen, waiting to arrive in your life. It is something that requires your alignment, your awareness, your posture, your willingness to fully step into what is already being made available to you. Because the truth is, not everyone who encounters a moment like this actually steps into it. Some hesitate, some doubt, some return to what feels familiar, and in doing so, they remain connected to a version of their life that no longer has authority, simply because they never aligned with what was being offered. He reveals this now with clarity that cuts through hesitation. The new timeline is open, but you must walk into it. That is where alignment becomes everything. Because alignment is not effort. Alignment is agreement. It is the moment where you stop arguing with what is being revealed and start accepting it as truth. It is the shift from questioning whether this is real to deciding that you will respond as if it is. And the decision changes everything. You feel it even now. A soul pull forward, a sense that something is opening, something is inviting you into a different way of seeing, thinking, and responding. But at the same time, there is a part of you that wants to stay where it is comfortable, where it understands the rules, where it knows how things usually unfold. That tension is the space between timelines, and you cannot remain in that space, because staying there too long creates confusion. It delays movement. It weakens clarity. He steps closer in the spirit, his voice steady and unmistakable. You cannot step into what is new while holding on to what was. That is the instruction. Because alignment requires release. Not just releasing the weight you carried, but releasing the identity that was built around that weight. The version of yourself that learned to expect delay, that learned to prepare for disappointment, that learned to approach opportunities with caution instead of confidence. That version cannot lead you into what is being opened now. You must shift internally, completely. He shows it like stepping into a new environment. The rules are different. The outcomes are different. The way things respond to you is different. But if you continue to act based on the old environment, nothing will make sense. That is why alignment matters before manifestation. Because what is coming will match the new timeline, not the old one. So how do you align? You stop rehearsing the past. You stop repeating the story of what went wrong. You stop identifying yourself through what you have been through. And you begin to move as if the rewriting is already complete. Because in the spirit it is. He speaks again, with clarity that removes all doubt. Act from where you are going, not from where you have been. That is alignment. It is choosing to respond to life from a place that reflects what has been rewritten, not what has been experienced. It is allowing your thoughts to shift, your expectations to rise, your posture to change. Not gradually, immediately. Because the moment you align, everything begins to respond differently. You will notice it in how you think, in how you speak, in how you react to what comes your way. Things that once made you hesitate will no longer hold the same power. Things that once felt uncertain will begin to feel clear. Because alignment brings clarity, and clarity accelerates movement. This is why the next moment matters so much. Because what is coming, the notification, the opportunity, the confirmation, it will meet you at the level of your alignment. If you are still rooted in the old mindset, you will see it through limitation. If you are aligned with the new, you will recognize it as expansion. The same moment, two completely different outcomes, determined by your alignment. He steps forward one final time in this moment, making this clear. You are not waiting to become ready. You are choosing to be ready now. That is the shift. Because readiness is not something that arrives. It is something you decide. And once you decide, the path opens. Fully. Without resistance. Without confusion. Without delay. So stand in it. Fully. Without hesitation. Without returning to the old. Because the new timeline is not forming. It is already here. And you are stepping into it now. Type "I step into the new timeline" in the comments. Blessing code 9090 is now activated. As you step into this new alignment, understand this. What is flowing through you right now is not meant to stop with you. Every revelation you receive is a seed of light meant to reach someone still walking in darkness. Someone still trapped in the old timeline you are breaking free from. When you release your support through Super Thanks or through the PayPal link in the description, you are not giving to a channel. You are sowing into a harvest of transformed lives, igniting lamps in places where hope has almost gone out. The Lord declares, "The seed you sow shall return to you pressed down, shaken together, and running over." And this is not distant scripture. It is a living promise activated by your obedience in this very moment. If your spirit feels this call, do not delay, because this is your opportunity to participate in something eternal, something far beyond what you can see. Your giving becomes a river, carrying this message into hearts that are waiting for confirmation just like you were. Step into this act now, and let your seed speak on your behalf in the Spirit. There comes a moment in every transformation where the external shift is no longer the biggest obstacle, the internal agreement is. And this is that moment. Because everything that has been revealed so far, the rewriting, the release, the transaction, the alignment, it is all moving, it is all active, it is all unfolding. But there is one final thread that still tries to connect you to what was. Your agreement with who you used to be. He reveals this now with precision, not to condemn you, but to free you. You cannot fully walk into what I have written if you are still agreeing with who you were before it changed. That is the truth that must be faced. Because the past version of you was not just a moment. It became a mindset. It became a way of thinking, a way of seeing, a way of interpreting everything that happened afterward. It shaped your expectations. It shaped your reactions. It shaped the quiet assumptions you carried into every new opportunity. Even when things began to improve, that version of you remained. Quietly, subtly, influencing how far you allowed yourself to go. That is why this step is necessary. Because breaking agreement is not about denying your past. It is about refusing to let it define your present. You feel it now, because something inside you recognizes this truth. There are thoughts you have repeated without realizing it. There are beliefs you have carried that no longer align with what is being revealed. There are internal statements that have become so familiar, you stop questioning them. Statements like, I always mess things up, or I have to be careful because things don't usually work out, or I missed my chance, so I have to settle for what comes next. Those are not just thoughts. They are agreements, and agreements create alignment. If you agree with limitation, you align with limitation. If you agree with delay, you align with delay. If you agree with the identity formed in your past, you remain connected to its outcome. That is why this moment matters so deeply. Because the rewriting has already taken place. But if your agreement has not changed, your experience will not reflect it. He steps forward in the Spirit, his voice firm and unwavering. You must release the version of yourself that no longer matches what I have written. That is not easy. Because that version of you is familiar. It feels safe. It understands how to navigate struggle, how to manage disappointment, how to protect you from risk. But it does not know how to receive abundance. It does not know how to operate without fear. It does not know how to step into something new without hesitation. And that is why it cannot lead you where you are going. He shows it like a mirror being held in front of you, not to reflect who you were, but to reveal who you have become. And there is a difference, a clear difference. The person standing in this moment is not the same person who made that mistake, not the same person who carried that weight, not the same person who adapted to that timeline. You have changed, even if you did not fully recognize it until now. And now, you must agree with the change. Fully. Without hesitation. Without returning to the old identity when things feel uncertain. Because uncertainty is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is new. He speaks again, with clarity that leaves no room for confusion. Do not introduce your past self into a future that has already been rewritten. That is the instruction. Because the moment you begin to think, react, or decide from the perspective of who you used to be, you reestablish the connection to the old timeline. Not because it has power, but because you gave it access. And that cannot happen now. Not when everything is aligned for something different. So this is the moment of separation. The moment where you consciously decide, that is not who I am anymore. That is not how I think anymore. That is not how I respond anymore. That is not the story I am living from anymore. And when you make that decision, something shifts instantly. Not gradually, not eventually, but immediately. Because agreement changes alignment, and alignment changes outcome. You will feel it. A sense of clarity, a release of hesitation, a quiet confidence that does not need validation. Because you are no longer divided between who you were and who you are becoming. You are fully aligned with what hath been written now. He steps closer one final time in this moment. This is where your past loses its voice. Let that settle. Because once the agreement is broken, the past can no longer speak into your future. It becomes what it was always meant to be. A moment, not a definition. And now, you are free to move forward without carrying it with you. What comes next will require this freedom. Because what is arriving will not match the old version of you. It will match the new one. And you are stepping into that now. Type "I release my old self" in the comments. Blessing code 9191 is now activated. There is something that happens the moment true release takes place, something that cannot be explained by effort, timing, or coincidence. It is not gradual. It is not delayed. It is immediate in the spirit, and then it begins to unfold in the natural with a speed that feels unfamiliar. That is what you are stepping into now. Because once the weight is released, once the agreement with the past is broken, once alignment is established, there is nothing left to slow down what has already been authorized for your life. He reveals this with clarity that shifts your entire understanding. What was delayed was not denied. It was waiting for your release. Let that settle into you. Because for so long, you interpreted delay as rejection. You saw time passing and assumed something was lost. You watched opportunities close and believed they were gone permanently. You experienced waiting and thought it meant no. But now you see differently. And now you understand that what was held back was not punishment. It was preparation. Preparation for this exact moment. When you would no longer carry the past, no longer agree with limitation, no longer operate from the identity that kept you bound to an outdated version of your life. And now that you are here, everything begins to move. Faster than you expect. He chose it like a dam that has been holding back water. For a long time, it seemed like nothing was flowing. Everything felt still, contained, restricted. But the moment that barrier is removed, the flow is not slow. It is powerful. It is immediate. It is overwhelming in the best way. That is what acceleration looks like. Not forced, not chaotic, but unstoppable. You will begin to notice it. Things aligning without effort. Opportunities appearing without struggle. Conversations opening doors you did not even know were there. Connections forming at the right time, in the right way, without you having to chase them. This is not coincidence. This is alignment meeting release. And when those two come together, acceleration is the result. But here is what you must understand. Acceleration can feel unfamiliar. It can feel almost too fast, too unexpected, too different from what you are used to. And in those moments, the instinct may be to slow down, to question, to analyze, to make sure everything makes sense before you move forward. That instinct belongs to the old timeline. He speaks now with clarity that grounds you in truth. Do not slow down what I am accelerating. Because this movement is not random. It is not unstable. It is not something you need to control. It is something you need to trust. Because everything that is unfolding now is connected to what has already been written. You are not chasing blessings. You are stepping into what has been released. And what has been released is moving toward you just as much as you are moving toward it. This is the shift. You are no longer trying to make things happen. You are responding to what is already happening. And that response must be immediate, aligned, without hesitation. Because hesitation introduces delay. Not because the opportunity disappears, but because your alignment wavers. And alignment is what sustains acceleration. He reveals it like a current pulling you forward. You can either move with it, allowing it to carry you into what has been prepared, or you can resist, trying to control the pace, trying to understand every detail before you take the next step. But resistance slows the experience. Trust sustains it. That is why your posture matters now more than ever. Not a posture of striving, not a posture of proving, but a posture of receiving. Open, ready, unquestioning of what has already been confirmed. Because what is coming next will require you to move differently, to respond quickly, to step into opportunities without overthinking, to trust that what is unfolding is not repeating the past, it is fulfilling what has been written. You will feel a momentum building, a sense that things are no longer stuck, no longer delayed, no longer uncertain. That is the acceleration, and it will not look like what you expected, because it is not based on your past expectations. It is based on your new alignment. He steps forward one final time in this moment, his voice steady and filled with authority. You are entering a season where things happen faster than you are used to. Do not retreat. Do not hesitate. Move with what is being released. That is the instruction. Because what is unfolding now is not temporary. It is the beginning of a new rhythm, a new flow, a new way of experiencing life that is not defined by delay, but by movement. And you are already inside of it. Stay ready, because what comes next will require you to trust this acceleration fully. Type "I move with the flow" in the comments. Blessing code 1010 is now activated. There is one final element that determines whether what has begun continues. Not the rewriting, not the release, not the acceleration, but the stability of it all. And that element is faith. Not the kind of faith that hopes something might happen. Not the kind of faith that waits for proof before it believes. But the kind of faith that agrees with what has already been established even before it fully appears. Because what you are standing in right now is a shift that has already been initiated in the spirit. The rewriting has already taken place. The weight has already been removed. The transaction has already been completed. The alignment has already been opened. The acceleration has already begun. But faith is what seals it. He reveals this now with precision that leaves no room for misunderstanding. What you believe now determines what remains. That is the truth. Because belief is not passive. Belief is alignment sustained over time. It is the decision to continue agreeing with what has been revealed, even when your environment has not fully caught up to it yet. And this is where many people lose what was meant to transform their lives. Not because it was taken from them, but because they stopped agreeing with it. They returned to doubt. They returned to old thinking. They returned to questioning what had already been confirmed. And in doing so, they slowly disconnected from what was already unfolded. He speaks now, steady and unwavering. Do not require constant signs to believe what I have already shown you. Because faith is not built on repetition. It is built on recognition. You have already recognized something in this moment. That is why you stayed. That is why you continued. That is why this message feels different from anything else you have encountered. Because something inside you knows this is not random. That knowing's faith. And now, that faith must remain steady. Because what comes next will not always look dramatic. It will not always feel overwhelming. Sometimes, it will look simple, subtle, quiet. And in those moments, the temptation will be to question whether anything is really happening. That is where faith becomes essential. Because faith does not depend on what is seen. Faith sustains what has already been activated. He shows it like a seal placed over everything that has taken place. The rewriting, the release, the transaction, the alignment, all of it is real. All of it is active. But faith is what locks it in. Without it, things feel uncertain. With it, everything stabilizes. And stability leads to manifestation. This is why your thoughts matter now more than ever. Because your thoughts reveal your agreement. And your agreement reveals your faith. If you return to thoughts of doubt, hesitation, or disbelief, you weaken your alignment. Not because what was done disappears, but because you step out of position to fully receive it. He makes this clear. You are not trying to believe. You are choosing to remain in what you already know. That is the difference. You are not convincing yourself of something new. You are staying anchored in something that has already been revealed. That is why this moment must not be treated casually. Because what has begun is not temporary. It is not conditional. It is not something that fades unless you forget about it. It is something that continues as long as you remain aligned with it. And alignment is sustained through faith. He steps closer in the spirit, his voice firm, grounding you in this truth. Hold your position. Do not shift. Do not return to old thinking. What I have started is already established. That is the instruction. Because there will be moments where your environment does not immediately reflect the shift. Moments where things look the same on the surface. Moments where nothing appears to be happening. But those are the moments where faith matters most. Because what you do in those moments determines whether the shift continues to unfold or begins to weaken in your experience. And it cannot weaken now. Not after everything that has already taken place. So remain steady. Remain aligned. Remain grounded in what has already been revealed. Because faith is not just belief. It is consistency. It is the refusal to return to what you have already been released from. It is the decision to stand in what has been written even before it fully manifests. And as you do that, everything begins to settle into place. Naturally. Effortlessly. Unstoppably. Because what is sealed in faith cannot be undone by doubt. You are not waiting anymore. You are sustaining what has already begun. And what comes next will confirm it in ways that leave no room for question. Type "My faith is sealed" in the comments. Blessing code 1111 is now activated. There are moments in your life that pass quietly unnoticed, unrecognized, unclaimed. And then there are moments like this, moments that carry weight, urgency, and consequence. Moments where what you choose, what you believe, and what you do next determines the direction everything takes from here. This is not just another moment. This is the moment. He stands now with authority, not distant, not symbolic, but present in the fullness of truth, delivering a final warning that is not meant to frighten you, but to awaken you fully. What has been rewritten must now be received. What has been released must now be walked in, because everything has already been set in motion. The rewind has taken place. The pen has moved. The weight has been lifted. The transaction has been completed. The alignment has been opened. The acceleration has begun. The confirmation is approaching. The faith has sealed it. Everything is ready. But now it comes down to you. You feel it in your spirit right now. A stillness, a clarity, a sense that something significant has just unfolded. Not externally, not visibly yet, but internally, deeply, undeniably. This is not imagination. This is recognition. Recognition that something has shifted. Recognition that you are no longer standing where you once were. Recognition that you have been brought to a point of decision. Because here is the truth that cannot be ignored. You cannot leave this moment the same way you entered it. He speaks now with a tone that carries both urgency and finality. If you walk away unchanged, you return to what has already been broken. That is the warning. Not because anything was taken from you, but because alignment was lost. Because the old timeline does not need to fight you if you choose it again. It simply resumes. Quietly. Automatically. Without resistance. And suddenly, the same patterns return. The same delays reappear. The same weight begins to form again. Not because the shift was not real, but because you disconnected from it. That cannot happen now. Not after everything that has been revealed. Not after everything that has been released. Not after everything that has already begun to move in your favor. This is why this moment carries urgency. Because you are not just hearing something. You are standing at a point where your response determines whether this shift continues or fades. He reveals it clearly. Stay. Receive. Move forward. Do not return. That is the instruction. Simple. Direct. Uncompromising. Because what is in front of you now does not require perfection. It does not require you to have everything figured out. It does not require you to understand every detail of what is coming next. It requires one thing. Commitment. Commitment to remain aligned. Commitment to think differently. Commitment to respond differently. Commitment to no longer return to the version of yourself that kept you bound to what has already been rewritten. And when you make that commitment, everything stabilizes. Everything locks into place. Everything begins to unfold exactly as it was meant to. You will see it. You will feel it. You will experience it in ways that leave no room for doubt. A notification will come. The opportunity will present itself. The confirmation will arrive. And when it does, you will know. Not because someone told you, but because your spirit will recognize it instantly. That is the divine confirmation. Not loud, not forced, but undeniable. He steps forward one final time, his voice steady, powerful, and filled with certainty. This is your moment. Do not treat it casually. Do not return to what I have already rewritten. Walk forward and watch what unfolds. Let that settle deeply within you. Because this is not the end of something. It is the beginning of a new direction, a new rhythm, a new reality that no longer reflects the past, but fulfills what has now been written over your life. And you are stepping into it now, fully, without hesitation, without looking back. Stay ready, because everything that follows will confirm that this moment was real. Type "I walk in the new path" in the comments. Blessing code 1212 is now activated. As this final confirmation settles into your spirit, understand this. What has just been released into your life is not meant to stop with you. You have become a vessel of light, a carrier of truth, and every seed you sow now becomes a flame igniting someone else's breakthrough. The Lord declares, "Those who sow in faith shall reap in overflow," and this is not a distant promise. It is a living word calling you into action now. I feel led to speak this directly. I choose to be part of what God is doing through this message. I choose to sow so others can receive what I have just received. When you give through Super Thanks, or the PayPal link in the description, or QR code, you are not supporting a video. You are opening the heavens over someone still trapped in darkness, still waiting for their moment of awakening. Do not delay this act, because this is not a suggestion. This is your opportunity to respond prophetically, to move in obedience while the anointing is present. As you release your seed, may it return to you multiplied. May doors open, may favor locate you, and may your new timeline be established without resistance. Act now, and let your giving become the extension of this divine moment.